Sorry, just say 3, 2, 1, then go.
Hello, it's Beata from BA English Coaching, and today I am reading again with David.
Hello.
And we are reading chapter 5, Greece. We have traveled from Afghanistan, through Pakistan, Iran, and then Turkey, and now we are in Greece. I hope you are enjoying reading with us. I hope that your English is improving and you are working on your pronunciation, rhythm, intonation, and yes, and you are finding more than just the language. You know, when you read a book, I don't know, David, whether that's the same with you, but when you read a book, you learn some lessons, or there are some lessons that you can take from the book. Is that correct?
I think so. I think when you read a book, I think we mentioned this last time, you try to get inside the head of the main characters and you empathize with them.
Yeah. So at the end of this session, I will ask you a couple of questions about the lessons for living that you can take from the book. I think we are ready. I hope you are ready. So chapter 5, Greece.
The sea started to get rough about midnight, I think, or thereabouts. We were rowing fast, but we couldn't shout out encouragement to each other the way professionals do, who always have someone either behind them or in front saying, and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and so on, because rowers row in unison. We couldn't because we didn't want to make a noise. We were afraid even to sneeze, which, as we were half naked, wearing nothing but underpants, we'd packed our clothes into plastic bags, which we'd sealed with adhesive tape to stop water getting in, was something that might well happen. We were afraid to sneeze because we thought the Coast Guard would pick up our sneezing on their radar over the noise of the waves. We'd been told that by rowing fast, we would land on the coast of Greece in 2 or 3 hours, but that was without taking into account the water coming into the dinghy. When the sea got rough and started pouring down on us as if it was raining, I took a water bottle, tore it in half with my teeth to make it into a bowl, and said to Hussein Ali, leave the patch and start throwing the water back into the sea.
How?
With this, I said, showing him the half bottle. At that moment, a wave ripped it out of my hand, as if it had heard me and didn't agree. I made another one. I took Hussein Ali's hand and pressed the bowl into it. With this, I said again. We were still rowing, but why then did we feel as if we weren't moving, or worse still, that we were going backwards? And as if that wasn't enough, the inflatable tubes got in the way, the inflatable tubes we'd been given to use as life preservers. We tied them to the dinghy with long ropes because we were afraid they'd bother us as we rowed. So unfortunately, when the wind blew hard, it lifted these inflatable tubes, turning them into balloons that made the dinghy rotate or swerve. Every now and again, the current or the wind or the waves threw us back towards the coast of Turkey, or so we assumed, because when we were tossed about like that, we weren't really sure which way was Turkey and which way was Greece. And little Hussein Ali, still collecting the water that was filling the dinghy, started whining.
I know why we can't get to Greece,
he said.
We can't get to Greece because the sea goes uphill in that direction.
Our point of reference was a lighthouse on the Greek coast, but after a while we stopped seeing it. The waves were so high, they covered it, and at that point, Hussein Ali started screaming.
We are only as big as a whale's tooth, and the whales will eat us. And if they don't eat us, the crocodiles will, even though you say there aren't any. We have to turn back. We have to turn back.
I'm not turning back, I said. We're near Greece, and if we aren't near, at least we're halfway by now. It's the same distance, so it makes no difference if we go on or turn back. And I prefer to die in the sea rather than start this whole journey all over again. We started arguing right there in the middle of the sea, with the darkness and the waves all around, and with Rahmat and me saying, to Greece, and Sultan and Liaquat saying, to Turkey, and Hussein Ali still bailing water and crying and saying, the mountain's falling, because the waves were so high, 2 or 3 meters or even more, that when they towered over us, when the dinghy was in the hollow between one wave and the next, it was as they were about to collapse on top of us. But instead, they lifted us right up, and when we were on the crest, let us down again with a bump, like the carousels I'd been on here in Italy at the amusement park. But right then, it wasn't amusing at all. So the situation was this: Rahmat and me rowing like mad towards Greece, or in the direction we thought Greece was, while Sultan and Liaquat were rowing towards Turkey, or in the direction they thought Turkey was. The argument degenerated into name-calling, and we started hitting and elbowing each other like complete idiots in a dinghy that was just a little dot in the middle of nowhere, while Hussein Ali was crying and saying,
What's going on? I'm doing my job of throwing out the water and you are hitting each other. Row, please, just row.
I think it was then that the boat appeared, or rather not the boat, the ship. A very big ship, a ferry or something like that. I saw it coming up behind Hussein Ali. As he spoke, it passed very, very close to us.
How close?
Do you see the florist shop outside the window, the distance from here to there?
As close as that?
As close as from here to there. These high waves were different from normal waves. They got mixed up with the others, and the dinghy made a strange movement, like a horse stung by a bee. And Liaquat couldn't hold on. I felt his fingers slide over my shoulder. He didn't scream. He didn't have time. The dinghy had suddenly tossed him out.
Let me get this right. Liaquat fell into the water?
Yes.
And what did the rest of you do?
We looked for him as best we could, hoping to see him among the waves, and we shouted, but he disappeared. When the waves from the ship, which didn't stop, maybe it saw us, maybe not. We couldn't tell. Anyway, when the waves subsided, we kept rowing and called Liaquat's name, and rowing and calling, turning in circles around the spot where we'd been, or so we thought, though in all probability we'd already moved a long way from there. Nothing. Liaquat had been taken by the darkness. At that point, I'm not really sure what happened. It may have been exhaustion. It may have been discouragement. It may have been that we felt too small, infinitely too small, not to succumb to all of these things. But at that point, we fell asleep. By the time we opened our eyes again, it was dawn. The water around us was dark, almost black. We rinsed our faces, spitting out the salt. We looked along the horizon and saw land, a strip of land with a beach and a hill. It wasn't too far away. We could make it. We started rowing quickly and painfully, without knowing whether it was Greece or Turkey. We simply said,
Let's row in that direction.
After being on our knees for so long, our legs had gone numb. We had tiny little cuts on our hands. We didn't even know how we got them, but they burned every time. The salt water made them wet. As we approached the island, the sky grew lighter, and it was then that Sultan saw a flag on a hill. All he said in a thin voice was,
A flag.
He pointed with his index finger. It kept flapping in the wind, but at those moments when it was fully stretched, we could see horizontal stripes, alternately blue and white, 9 stripes in all, starting with a blue stripe at the top, and in the upper corner, on the same side as the pole, a square, also blue, with a white cross in the middle, the flag of Greece. Reaching shallow water, we got out of the dinghy, we dragged it ashore, closer to the rocks, our backs stooped so as to be as inconspicuous as possible. Although there didn't seem to be anybody about, we deflated the dinghy, first squeezing the air through the plugs, then getting impatient, ripping the plastic with stones. We folded it quickly and hid it under a rock and covered the rock with sand. We looked at each other.
What shall we do?
Asked Hussein Ali. We were in our underpants. We'd lost our clothes. What could we do? Stay here, I said.
Where are you going?
To the village.
What village? We don't know where we are.
On the coast.
On the coast.
Said Sultan.
Congratulations.
Let me finish, I said. We were supposed to get to Mytilene. Yet, right?
Do you know which way Mytilene is?
No, but there has to be a village around here. A few houses, some shops. I'll look for food and even some clothes if possible. You wait here. There's no point wandering around like 4 stray dogs, getting ourselves noticed.
I want to come too,
said Hussein Ali. No.
Why?
I've already explained,
Because you can hide better when you are alone,
said Rahmat. Hussein Ali gave me a dirty look.
Make sure you come back.
I'll be back as soon as I can.
You won't leave us, will you?
I turned away without replying and set off along the path that climbed the hill. I walked for a long time without knowing where I was going. I may even have got lost, which is quite possible when you don't know where you're going. The houses appeared out of nowhere, behind the trees. In amongst the houses was a supermarket. There were groups of tourists, families on holiday, elderly people out for a stroll. An ice cream parlour with a long queue in front of it, and newsagents, a garage that hired out scooters and cars, and a little square with benches and a playground. From the ice cream parlour came cheerful music, played very loud. The supermarket was paradise. The supermarket was my target. All I had to do was go in, take some food, nothing too difficult, fruit would do, and clothes, maybe bathing trunks if they had any. Young boys walked around in bathing trunks in a seaside resort is one thing, but young boys walking around in their underpants, well, that's another matter entirely. A police car passed. I hid behind, more inside than behind, a flower bed. I squatted there for a few minutes watching the movements at the front of the supermarket to see if I could get in without attracting attention, and came to the conclusion that there was no way I could go in through the front, but I could always go round the back. So I flattened myself against the walls of the houses like a lizard, slit under a gate, getting a couple of nasty scratches on the stomach in the process, and finally climbed a metal fence. I entered the supermarket like a ghost, taking advantage of the fact that the assistant unloading boxes of snacks was too busy to notice me. As I placed my bare foot on the cold, slippery tiles of the section of the supermarket selling household goods, I heard voices I recognized coming from behind the shelf. I put my head round. Rahmat, Hussein Ali, and Sultan were strolling along the aisles, watching from a distance by a bewildered young blonde assistant. They disobeyed. I had no idea how they managed to get there before me. I stepped out, signaling to them to act normally and pretend we didn't know each other. Each of us took something for himself, food but no clothes, because they didn't sell them. People were looking at us in astonishment, wide-eyed. We had to hurry, but when we tried to leave, we found the door of the storeroom at the back was blocked. There was still the main door, but to get out that way, we'd have to make a run for it. As we sped down the fruit and vegetable aisle, then the toiletries aisle, then some other aisle I can't remember, I wondered if the person yelling in Greek was the manager, and if the manager, who was hurling insults at us in Greek, had picked up his Greek telephone to call the Greek police. Oh, if only those three idiots had waited for me. I would have done everything differently, much more discreetly, instead of which we hurtled out through the glass door without crashing into anyone, thank God. But no sooner had we taken a few steps along the pavement, surrounded by children with ice cream running down over their fingers, and little old ladies in silvery sandals, and people with scared looks on their faces, although I doubt young boys in their underpants could really scare anyone, then a police car slammed on the brakes, just like in the films, I swear, and three huge policemen got out. I hardly had time to even be aware of this police car before I was inside it, with Hussein Ali in the back seat, just the two of us. The others had apparently managed to get away.
Pakistanis?
No.
Afghans?
No.
I know you are Afghans. Don't mess me around.
No Afghans, no.
Oh, no Afghans, no. Afghans, yes. You little rats. Afghans. I can't recognize you from the smell.
They dragged us to the police station and shut us up in a little room. We could hear steps in the corridor and voices saying things we didn't understand. And I remember that when I was afraid of, more than anything else, more than being beaten or put in prison, was being fingerprinted. I had heard all about this fingerprinting business from some boys who worked at the stone cutting factory in Iran. They told me that in Greece, as soon as they caught you, they took your fingerprints, and if you were illegal, you were screwed. Because after that, you couldn't ask for political asylum in any other country in Europe. So Hussein Ali and I decided to make nuisance of ourselves in order to get thrown out before the fingerprint people arrived. But to get thrown out, you have to be a serious nuisance, a professional. First of all, we started whining and yelling that we had stomach aches because we were hungry, and the policeman brought us dry biscuits. Then that we had to go to the toilet, we kept saying, toilet, toilet. After the toilet, we started crying and shouting and moaning, and kept it up until night fell. Police on night duty are usually less patient, and if things go badly, they hit you till you bleed, but if things go well, they'll let you go. We took the risk. Things went well. It was almost morning, still dark, and with very few cars around, when two of the policemen, fed up with our yelling, threw open the door of the little room and, dragging us by our ears, flung us into the street, shouting at us to go back where we'd come from. Bunch of screaming monkeys or something like that. We spent the whole morning searching for Sultan and Rahmat. We found them outside the town near the beach, and I didn't have time to be pleased at finding them because I immediately lost my temper. I'd been hoping they'd have found some clothes in the meantime, trousers, t-shirts or whatever, maybe shoes, but they hadn't found a thing. All four of us looked like tramps, and it isn't true that you can't judge a book by its cover. You can. One thing I'd done while I was in the police station, as an illegal, you have to be able to exploit every opportunity, had been to have a good look at the large map of the island on the wall. The place where we were marked in red, Mytilene in blue, it was from Mytilene that you could catch a boat for Athens. It might be a day's walk through fields and along secondary roads, but we'd get there even with aching feet. We set off walking along the edge of a road. The sun was it was hot enough to bake bread, even if you broke out into a sweat. Sultan was complaining. I don't think Hussein Ali had any breath left. Otherwise, he would have complained too, as usual. And from time to time, he would lean into the road and wave at the cars to stop and give us a lift, even though he was half naked. I dragged him away, saying, "No, what are you doing? They'll call the police again." But he kept on doing it.
Let's stop here, I beg you,
he said.
Let's wait for someone to give us a ride.
If you carry on like that, I said, it'll be the police who'll pick you up. You'll see. Not that I wanted to be the bird of ill omen or whatever you call it. Not at all. It was in my own interest to continue the journey with them so we could look out for each other, but they kept on and on about how tired they were and how much better it would be to get a lift from the small van or something like that. So finally I said, no, and we walked away from the group. Nearby there was a small shop with a petrol pump, and to the right of it, a dirty, flaking old phone box, half hidden by the branches of a tree. I went in, grabbed the telephone, and pretended to be making a call, instead of which I was keeping my eyes on my companions to see what they were up to. When the police car arrived with its lights on, but without a siren, I thought for a moment I should dash out and yell, "Run away," but it was too late. I huddled in the phone box and watched as they fled, and the police caught up with them and beat them with truncheons. I saw it all from a kneeling position, through the dirty windows, unable to do anything, and praying that no one thought of making a phone call. As soon as the police car had gone, with a screech of tires, I left the phone box, crept past the service station, making sure there was nobody around, and set off hell for leather along a sandy, deserted country lane. I kept on running, without knowing where I was going, until my lungs were ready to burst, and I had to lie down on the ground to recover. When I realized I was fine, I got up and started walking again. After half an hour, I passed a courtyard. It was a courtyard of a private house, surrounded by a low wall and with a big tree in the middle. I didn't see anyone, so I climbed over. There was a dog, but it was tied up. It saw me and started barking, and I hid under the thick branch of the tree. I must have been tired because I fell asleep.
I can't imagine you were pretty tired, Anayat.
It wasn't only the fact I was tired. There was something about that place that made me feel calm, you know?
What exactly?
I couldn't say. Some things you just feel. After a while, the old lady who lived there came out. She woke me up, but gently. I leapt to my feet and was going to run away, but she made me a sign to come inside. She gave me some good food to eat, vegetables and something else. She made me take a shower. She gave me some nice clothes too, a shirt with blue stripes, jeans, and a pair of white trainers. It was incredible that she had all those clothes in her house, and in my size. I don't know whose they were, maybe a grandson of hers. The lady kept talking all the time in Greek and English. I didn't understand much. Whenever I saw her smile, I'd say, "Good, good." Whenever she made a serious face, I'd also make a serious face and shake my head from side to side. No, no. In the afternoon, after I'd had my shower and got dressed, the old lady went with me to the bus station, bought me a ticket. Yes, she actually bought it for me, put 50 euros in my hand, a whole 50 euros, said goodbye and left. Yes, I thought, there really are some very strange and very kind people in the world.
There you go again.
What do you mean?
You tell me things, Anayat, and then immediately you go on to something else. Tell me more about this lady. Describe her house.
Why?
What do you mean, why? I'm interested. Other people might be too.
Yes, but I already told you. I'm only interested in what happened. The lady is important for what she did. Her name doesn't matter. What her house doesn't matter. She could have been anyone.
How do you mean, anybody?
Anybody could have behaved like that.
Now, I think this is the place in the book, in chapter 5, where we are going to finish. This is such a beautiful ending to this chapter, well, the bit that we are reading. As I said at the beginning, there are lessons for living that you can take from each book. And I would like you to finish reading chapter 5 to see what happens to Anayat. So, what was the most surprising or interesting lesson that you learned from the story, and why? The lesson I learned from the story is that there are still these kind and generous people like this lady, despite the fact that we hear all these crazy and sad and depressing stories and news from the radio and from the television. Good people, kind people, generous people still exist, and this is just so inspiring and beautiful. David, what was the most interesting or surprising lesson that you learned from this chapter?
What I found most interesting was the fact that they'd landed in Greece, and as most of you know, Greece was the first place that we know of in the world to establish a kind of Western style of civilization, and that I think was personified by the behavior of the lady in the story, who did show some gentleness and kindness and tolerance towards strangers who were clearly in a very difficult position.
Yes. Thank you so much for reading with us. We've got only one more chapter to read, chapter 6, and it ends in Italy. If you have enjoyed it, please subscribe to this channel, and we look forward to reading with you the last chapter. Please share your comments and what you think was the most surprising or interesting lesson that you learned before in the comments below. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.